Hi everybody, I'm Jack and this is Raw Tropical Living. Thanks for joining me again today. Been working hard all day and just got the house to myself, so it's late afternoon. I'm going to be making some dinner in a while, so I thought it was a good time to do a video. I've been thinking about this one for a while. I've touched on my yoga practice briefly before, and actually I'm going to be talking about my yoga practice more in detail, or just kind of some thoughts on it later. This isn't so much on the detail, but just kind of how my life comes together by the paths that I've chosen. Depending on how long and how many videos you've watched of mine. I did one a while back, and I've said several times that I became vegan for the health purposes, and the animals were kind of a secondary thing, which quickly became just as important. Now I consider myself an ethical vegan. I don't think I've bought any clothing made of animal products since, just mainly because I don't buy a lot of clothing, and so it's more, like I say, it's more than just being for the health reasons. Now I do consider myself an ethical vegan to a large extent, and my particular brand, like my yoga practice, that's why I don't do too many videos on it, because most of what you see, and I know what most people are expecting to see, is demonstrations of brilliance with the asana, or the postures, or the moves that you go through in yoga. Whereas my path's a little bit different. I've been practicing right about a year now, and from the first I practiced, now my thoughts have evolved, but even from the beginning, I'm starting at 49 at the time, and I'm thinking, okay, yoga is more, this is something, I do want the exercise, I need a good healthy exercise, but I want this to be more than just about the physical and the asana and accomplishing and achieving. To me, even back then, that's just not what yoga is about. So I set off from the very beginning of thinking, okay, not going to put any expectations on myself, and it's as much for the inside as it is for the outside. It's a meditative process for me when I'm having problems, and I haven't meditated in a long time. It's the next best thing for me. I would like to sit in silence, but to get in touch with my breathing and go through these. Okay, so how do these come together? Lately, like I say, a lot of my idea of yoga became defined when I started searching and reading, beyond just going to classes and doing the asana. And one thing kind of always leads to another. My yoga teacher, even though she teaches a vinyasa flow where I go, is an Ashtangi. That's her love. And she goes to India once a year, so she speaks of Patanjali in classes from time to time, and brings in a little bit of the philosophy and a little bit of the thought behind yoga. So, she starts talking about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and there's different interpretations of them, and there's different people that have done a version. BKS Iyengar, one of the latest ones, or actually one that I've heard that's one of the best, even though I haven't read his. Well, I start reading him, and this leads me to reading about Pattabhi Jois, and I know I butchered these names. And I read a little bit about him and understood more about the way he taught his yoga. And then I stumbled upon the name T. Krishnamacharya, and it just his interpretation and reading about him. I've read like 3 or 4 books about him. He didn't write a book, or some of his writings were used in various books, but I've read one by I forget who the first one is by, but one by his son, Desikachar, who has carried on his lineage very well, and one by his grandson. Well, anyhow, I'm reading one now about putting together your own practice, and now just reading about this guy, just got me into the concept of, or actually I've been thinking about this for a long time. Ever since my awareness of that I found myself being an ethical vegan and understanding the pain and suffering of the animals, I first started hearing about, understanding, reading about Ahimsa. Ahimsa is basically non-harmfulness. And the way that it relates to yoga, classical yoga under Patanjali has 8 different limbs of yoga. And the first limb is the yamas, or social contracts. Now the first yama is perhaps the most famous one, Ahimsa. And it's usually translated as nonviolence. This refers not only to physical violence, but also to the violence of words or thoughts, What we think about ourselves or others can be as powerful as any physical attempt to harm. To practice ahimsa is to be constantly vigilant, to observe ourselves in interaction with others, and to notice our thoughts and intentions. It is often said that if one can perfect the practice of ahimsa, one need learn no other practices of yoga, for all the other practices are subsumed in it. Whatever practice we do after the yamas must include ahimsa as well. Practicing breathing or postures without ahimsa, for example, negates the benefits these practices offer. Now, a lot of yogis are not vegans. Now, when we're talking about our classical and our yoga masters in India, Krishnamacharya, some of the other top gurus and masters in yoga, they usually, if they're not fully vegan, they generally don't eat animal flesh. A lot of them. I know Krishnamacharya was heavily a vegan, but they'll eat stuff. And over in India, you know, the way things are kept, I'm not going to argue on them, the ethics of it. But I imagine, you know, they eat a lot of ghee and this butter, this something butter, whatever. But anyway, what I'm getting at is pretty much the concept, and the way I've taken the concept of ahimsa for me, do no harm, fits right in with my raw vegan lifestyle. Because, you know, like I say, I've become, and I'm not a Jain. Like I say, I always say, look that word up. There's some interesting people, the Jain. They're a sect of Hinduism. And they literally wear masks so they don't suck a gnat or a fly in. They sweep everywhere they go. They sweep in front of them so they don't step on an ant. You know, I've gotten really compassionate toward animals. I even tried, there's a certain type of ant that I try to work around and not kill at times. But then I am playing God, because there's little tiny guys that get all over my counter if there's sugar, and they just get wiped off. But, you know, otherwise I would have like just ants everywhere. But yeah, I've become aware, and for me, ahimsa is literally do no harm, you know, and it is very much not just in action but in thought and what we think, you know, what we say to people sometimes, especially in this raw vegan community or the raw community, the vegan community. You know, for me, like I've told this many times before, but when I started eating this way, it just melted away a lot of the darkness, a lot of the negativity, a lot of the, even, I don't think I ever wanted to hurt people, but I just became a much more thoughtful person. And, you know, I see a lot of people, they're vegan, and there's some of they'll say some of the nastiest things to people that you can imagine. And in my opinion, your diet doesn't mean anything. Your diet is garbage. I will not listen to your diet. I don't care anything about what you're eating if you don't show kindness in your actions, in your thoughts, in your words. You could be eating the most pristine thing in the world, or think you are, and I don't want to hear anything about it, because if you still have that mentality of thinking, of being harmful to others, of being hateful to others, you're probably not eating the right thing, because when you're eating the right thing, your body gets cleaned out and you get all this garbage out of your head as well as your body. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's just been a little, I like that word, synergy. It's just been a real synergetic, if that's a word, experience, you know, seeing my thoughts and ideas about my yoga practice develop, see my thoughts and ideas about how I eat develop, and, you know, just applying this all to ahimsa. I'm actually thinking about getting a tattoo. I haven't had any ink for a while, an ahimsa tattoo here on the forearm, but we'll see. But anyhow, I'm going to start branching out and sharing a little bit more just of things outside strictly raw vegan and food, because you're really missing the boat if it's all about food. You can't watch just strictly food videos all the time, because food ain't going to get you there. There's so many things we need to do to live a healthy life, and I don't mean just health for the body, but health for our mind, health for our spirit, being happy. And this includes, you know, the food, yeah, but we want to get the exercise. We want to do some sort of contemplation or some sort of inner work, whether you meditate or whatever you do. We want to drink water. I'm about to begin, and I think I mentioned before, and I haven't gotten to it yet. Thought I was going to start working on this when I was in the States, but breathing. I mean, I'm about to get into the pranayama, limb of yoga. That's probably not the way to say it, get into it, but because I don't want it to sound like, lessen it or sound like I'm dabbling. I'm about to start exploring and studying pranayama, because our breathing, I mean, I think the breathing in the water is just, you know, probably more important than the food, because, you know, we're made up of 75% or more of water. We breathe every day. You know, we run out of food, we can live. We run out of water, we can't. You know, we can still live for a while. We go for more than 4 minutes without breath, and we're pretty much dead. So yeah, so there's more to it. You know, let's. I think we're going to explore a little bit more about, you know, and the food will fit in there. The food's always a part of it, because, like I say, for me especially, and I can only relate my experiences. What the food did for me was it brought the clarity. Now, to some people, they might call that it's some woo-woo stuff or whatever. I think there's probably a science behind it. You know, just like when we have garbage in the body, it probably just affects our mood, it affects our spirit, it affects who we are. And so the food, I'm never going to drop it, because it brought me clarity. It cleaned me out, and it brought me clarity. Anyhow, just a little sharing today. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I hope you'll subscribe to the channel, and, you know, tell me if you like these videos, if you find them interesting. You can ask questions if you want, and as always, thanks for joining me. Love you guys.